Okay, we are now streaming. I will now call the meeting of the Newcastle Board of Selectmen to order. The date is April 20th, 2020. The time is 7:15. And first thing we want to do is amendments to the agenda. I have a couple. I've been unfortunately following the news, and I'm a little concerned about Zoom's security. They're under a heavy stress right now. I know we've all been using them, but I'm interested in trying some alternatives. And we have an executive session tonight. I tested it with John earlier. It was really simple. I'd like to just, when we finish this meeting and we go into executive session, I'll start a Google Meet and you'll all get an email real quick. Click the button, takes you right in, exact same thing, just a different platform. We're already on Google because all of our email accounts are hosted on Google. I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to give it a shot.
Yeah, I used it the other day. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. And you don't have to literally do like anything. You hit the button, you're in.
Right. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
Ben, you want to mute me because it's about to be a bark fest.
You got it. All righty. So I'd like to add a couple of things to the agenda under, let's see, I guess it'd be some new business, some old business. Under unfinished business, I'd like to discuss 5.3. I'd like to discuss tentatively scheduling town meeting for July 20th. Don't want to talk about it right now. We'll just add it and we'll talk about it when we get to it. I'd also like to suggest that 5.4, we discuss having part 2 of our budget meeting. This is part 1 of our budget meeting. Part 2 of our budget meeting we have in a week. So I'd like to make that 5.4, and we'll discuss that when we get to it as well. And at the moment, those are the only additions or changes that I have to the agenda. Does anyone have anything? Wanda?
I'm just wondering where we fit in the code talk into all of this.
Great question. Honestly, haven't even thought about it, but we gotta get on it. I think if we have time, let's put it on tentatively on the agenda for our next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be the second Monday next month. What's the date of that? That'd be the 11th. Let's make that
May 11th.
Let's discuss that at 5.5. We'll make that 5.5. We'll talk about it tonight. Anybody else? Any other amendments to the agenda? Anything?
Nope.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the changes to the agenda?
So moved.
Brian, Joel seconds. All in favor? I'm gonna not do the roll call. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Yes. We'll do ayes and nays. Okay, so that's all I got. We'll move on to unfinished business. So last week we talked about goal setting for the budget process, and I went through my little PowerPoint. Hoorah. Tonight we have some things we're going to talk about right now, some things we're going to talk about in executive session. We have the road commissioner with us, Seth, and I'd like him to go over his I'm going to unmute you there, Seth. There you are. Yes. I'd like him to go over. You all right, Carolyn? Yes. I'm going to unmute you.
Like 4 of you on. And I couldn't see Seth, so I went to another page to get him on.
Oh, okay. You got it now?
Well, I only see you, Joel, and John, and I don't see the others.
That's all that matters.
So I was trying to push those little buttons and it took me out.
I gotcha. Yeah. Set it back to speaker mode so whoever's speaking shows up on your screen.
Right.
Like that one?
Yeah, there you go. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, that works.
All right. So now whoever's talking will show up for you. So
I
based on our conversation last week, John had a conversation with Seth about putting together a list of projects and things for annual maintenance for budget. And so he can present that. We can go over it. We're not really talking any numbers. We're talking goals at this point. And the one thing I do want to quickly say is we're going to have these discussions tonight about goals, and my goal for this is for us to make decisions, to provide guidance to the town administrator, to formulate the budget, and then he'll present it to us. So we can obviously we can talk some numbers, but I think the bigger, more important thing is to set the goals and the direction, and have our town administrator actually handle all the numbers and then present it to us based on the goals. So without further ado, Seth, take it away. What do you have in mind for annual public works projects?
Okay. Basically, the work plan is very similar to what we had last year for annual stuff. So we have our regular sweeping like we've done last year, catch basin maintenance, striping. Everything is pretty much the same as what we did last year. And this year proposed for actual work projects within the maintenance budget is ditching of Lewis Hill Road, the intersection of Happy Valley and 194 intersection improvements. Small section on Academy Hill outside of our work area, approximately 500 feet long by 20 feet wide. That if any of you are familiar, I know Carolyn will be, but right by Sheila St. Cyrs this year happened to really take it rough in one particular section. So that section of road to be reclaimed and fixed. We did not get to the bridge on Station Road to clean it and get the approaches done. That it just got consumed in other projects last year, so that is back on the work plan. Our grading is very similar to what we had last year. 2 times, once with applying some gravel, and then once just a touch upgrade before the winter season happens. We did not get to do that last year because of the weather, because it basically rained for almost 6 weeks straight coming through the end of October into November. So that is put back, that is the same scope of work as what we had before for the grading of the roads, of the gravel roads.
Is that do you have a date for that yet?
For grading?
For grading? I'm getting asked for everybody, so.
Yep, I can imagine. Roads are starting to dry out. We will get to them just as soon. To be completely honest with you, our grader operator had a recent death in the family.
Sorry to hear that.
He is out on bereavement, and he hopes to be back next week. As soon as he is back, we will be on it. But I've got to give him just a little time to. His significant other passed away, so I got to do that.
Yep.
If he doesn't, for whatever reason, there's complications, then we'll move on to Plan B. And we do have another person that runs a grader, so I'll slide him in. It's just a matter of rearranging. But I would prefer to have Steve do it if at all possible. So I talked to him today, and his indication was that he'd be back next week.
So we've had questions. Sorry, Wanda, just a second.
No, that's okay.
We've had some questions from residents about street sweeping, what areas of town, and if we're going to expand that at all. What are your thoughts about street sweeping? I know I've seen a sweeper out there. That's probably not ours. That was probably the state's.
Nope. Currently, our street sweeper that we hire, who also works for the state as well, which works very good because it tends to go hand in hand. And to be quite honest with you, we get a good value out of that while he's doing a little stuff for the state. He does help us out a little bit, so that's good. He has been out and sweeping. To be honest with you, he got an early start at it before we got that last big snowstorm, and then had to redo some of his work because that, April is a winter month. However, we were all kind of hoping that we were going to get an early spring. So with that said, he jumped on it a little early, and it bit us, but that's okay. So he's going back over some of the sidewalks that he did and resweeping. So he is out and about. He is under the current work plan is what the town has always done in the past. I haven't altered that as of yet until I get direction from you folks. So that means all of the in-town roads are going to be swept. Main Street parking spots, the entrance, just the entrance, not the actual Main Street itself, but where our roads intersect. He starts on Main Street and goes in. The sidewalks get swept. The firehouse parking lot gets swept. The town office parking lot gets swept. And then from there, it's really your direction on where we want to go for any extra roads. In the past, we have gone out to Sheepgate Village. In the past, we have gone down to South Newcastle and done some of those roads. That has always been usually upon request and guidance from you guys after the fact and not part of the regular budget. If you'd like to include those as to be part of the regular scope, then we could. It's going to just be slightly more money.
Have you driven the roads to find out any heavy spots? Because I know when I was driving around, there's a few, but
There are a few, obviously our low-lying areas get hit pretty hard with some sand. It's really just your call, Brian, where you guys want to do them. Intersections typically are heavier than not. None of these roads have curbing on them. None of them really have any drainage per se that is closed drainage structures. So it's really just a matter of personal preference of where you guys want to expend those funds that I will do as you direct.
Wanda, you had a question a second ago.
Well, I actually have two questions, but the first one, I'll start with the sweeping one. They were sweeping the North Dyer Neck Road today, which seems, I don't know how necessary that is. Maybe there's been complaints from people. There's a very short stretch of hot top, which doesn't seem to, it all kind of runs downhill, but that's just a thought. I didn't know how it's done, but I don't know how necessary that is for the future. But the second thing is I don't see the North Newcastle Road on this plan. And I know we're doing Academy Hill, but North Newcastle was supposed to be done last year. And I don't see that on the work plan for this summer. So is that still on, or are we looking at these projects, what we're looking for 2021?
No, what we're discussing right now is regular maintenance and not capital maintenance. So
Okay,
anything
so the North Newcastle is capital and that's still on.
North New is in capital. Yes, correct. Yes, you're right.
Okay,
And
all right.
and the advantage in trying to be as open and honest and as politically correct as possible, the advantage to doing a road like North Dyer Neck Road most likely is because the sweeper is traveling, doing work for the state, going to the intersection of 194 up in Alna and happens to do our road as he goes by, just because he knows that is a road. That's the type of
Benefit.
that we may get when we work with the sweeper that happens to be working with the state under the state contract at the same time. If you can help me read between the lines there.
Thank you. So there has been a couple of requests for some of these sort of lesser traveled roads that sand does get built up on over the years. It might be a good idea to put together a loose plan for perhaps dealing with, like, for example, last year, Pleasant Street.
Yep.
We added that one at the last minute because it was basically just dirt. You couldn't even see the asphalt. It was so horrible. But that's not a road that needs to be swept every year. Maybe what we should do is, at your discretion, develop a street sweeping plan that includes roads that are done every year, roads that are swept every 2 years, roads that are swept every 3 years. And that way people, when we talk about it every year, we say, well, we did it 2 years ago, it's coming up this year. And they know that we haven't forgotten about them. We'll get there. But there's definitely roads that don't need it every year and don't even need it every other year. So
Sure. I can put something like that together for you and get you out for your review. Yeah, I can do that.
Sheepskid, I know we've had requests out there. So if you just want to take another look at it this week, if you think it needs it, I would say let's add it in and see what it looks like. Give the numbers to John and we'll see what we can do. Anyone have any other questions for Seth about any of the other annual maintenance stuff? Joel, go for it.
So I just want to say, usually the street sweeper guy comes out and does the intersection for Island Road, Cochrane Road, that whole area. 'Cause it's a big, wide area. And then there is actually a catch basin just above my upper driveway that was put in when the road was rebuilt, however many years ago that was, eight years ago, something like that. And so just to add that to the list, because I don't know if that's on the list that you got, but
Where is that, Joel, exactly?
it's so there's like you pass my house and you start going up the hill, and it's not very clearly defined. It's like it's supposed to catch all the water that runs down that hillside. It's on the same side as my house.
Okay.
And what happens is it gets covered with leaves and sand and everything else like that. I usually clean it out every year, but I haven't obviously cleaned the inside of it out. So,
Well,
that's
that's
right there.
to my knowledge, nobody knows about. I didn't know that you had one way out.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, it was something that Steve put in when he was, they were reconfiguring everything over there to try and divert a lot of that water off. And there is a lot of water that shoots down into that little gully. But yeah, there's quite a waterworks that goes underneath the road and out on the other piece of property. There's actually 2 big culverts over there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We're going to be out there doing some cleanup over the next couple of days, and I will find that, clean it up, identify it, and then I will also add it to the cleaning list.
Yeah, and you just might want to know, because like I said, so from where it goes kind of on my property and it goes all the way across, it's a pretty long culvert that goes under the road. So it's just a good one to know about. You'll see it on the opposite side of the road, on my other person's property. So it's over there.
Okay, well, I'll find it.
Seth, the only other question I had for you on annual stuff is which of the roads are you feeling like we're going to be doing crack filling on this year? Any
Crack filling?
Yeah, crack sealing.
Ben, I've been riding a few of the ones that were paved within the last few years to see which would be a good candidate for that. We did get a portion of Lewis Hill done last year, so I'd like to finish that. We have been doing Lynch Road to try to keep that as long as possible. The other roads that we have recently paved have all been pretty small in nature. By that I mean they did East Hill County Road was one of them. We did I'm drawing a blank now. The little dead end one there in the mills.
Old Austin Avenue.
Old Austin. Thank you, Brian. Yes, we did. They did Old Austin Road. So some of those are fairly small, and I know we want to keep them, but internally in my head, I'm having a little bit of a debate whether it's worth it there or to take that money and go to like the lower end of Academy Hill, where that's a little bit bigger road, where it gets more traffic, and I feel it'd probably be a little bit more costly to keep it together. So those dollars being spent on some of those bigger roads, I think are more advantageous. So what I did is we had an allowance last year. I took the bill of what we did last year, which was roughly right around $5,000, and that's what I carried for a budget for this year. That probably won't get us all of one particular road, but what I would like to do is, as the next month or so comes along, is really find out exactly where, because I don't have a great answer for you of exactly point A to point B. I think that we really should look at Academy Hill and preserving it. I don't want those little roads to go to waste, so there might be a little bit of money spent on each one to get the bigger cracks, but not be so fussy with the minor ones, to allow us to have some funds to do, a little bit on some of these bigger roads. That's kind of where my head's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know we're investing in infrastructure, and we're laying down hot top, which is all good. We just gotta, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but every penny we put into crack sealing keeps water from penetrating the surface, and that's another year we don't have to, another year sooner that we don't have to repave that road.
Correct.
It's small money for good maintenance is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, like East Old County Road, for example, that we had to replace a couple of cross pipes out there. So it would be good to do those cross cuts where we did to tie that road in to make sure it's fairly tight. Stuff like that. I think that would be a good use of some crack sealing money. I've got a couple of decent cracks where the water's moved on that road that I'd like to get tightened up before winter comes in. So that would be a prime example of a little bit smaller road that I think would benefit from a couple of that crack filling money be used on. And then again, I really see, you know, we were what, 15 years ago thereabouts, I'm guessing, because I don't know 100%, but when the town spent a lot of money and redid the lower end of Academy Hill, and I really don't want to lose it, because that is
Right.
that was a significant investment in, you know, I want to do everything we can to try to keep it good.
Yeah. On East Oak County, where you do those culverts, actually, that section is full of pock marks now.
Is it?
So
Yeah.
I'd have to do something a little more than that. And when
Yeah.
you're out here, Mr. Bowers, that lives up the top of Zeller Hill,
Yeah.
all that water, you know, we put the rocks in there years ago to
Yeah.
kind of push the water aside. He says it's all flooding out
Okay.
onto the road now. So you might want to look at that when you're coming up over.
Yeah. Yeah, we were out the other day doing, we've been working, as you guys know, we've had some pretty significant storms the last couple of weeks. So we spent 4 days last week, just the morning for a couple hours today. And we will be spending another couple of days this week. We've been going every road by road. We've been physically walking the roads, open up ditch lines. We've been chipping anything that we can get through a chipper. I was able to negotiate, and a big shout out to Damascotta Hardware, who had actually closed his rental section, but for the town, he opened us up. So he didn't give us, we're renting, but he allowed us to rent one of his machines. So we've had that, and we're physically chipping everything. I've made arrangements for a pulp truck to come through. I've got a list of roads where the trees are too big to chip, and those will be picked up by, you know, a truck and get out of the way. We've got everything in town done, everything out in Sheepshead Village done, that we can do. We'll be starting in on Lynch Road tomorrow, and I hope to be finished up, you know, Thursday-ish. We should be finished up out through Station and Cochrane and Island Road out through there. Those are our next steps.
So based on our overall budgeting goal, which is to hold the mill rate this year, I don't know if you and John have had a conversation, but just based on, you know, what you're looking at for annual maintenance, if John comes to you and says, we got to cut something, you have priorities in mind of what can be safely put onto next year's budget, so that we can meet our goal this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know what your guidance is for budget and where you guys want to be, and we'll do what we can, you know, we'll make it work.
Okay. Right. Any other questions for Seth while we have him on annual maintenance? All right, so we're gonna set a meeting to discuss capital. I'm hoping we can maybe do that in a week, but we'll see, and we'll let you know
Yeah.
when we can get that going. But that would be the next part, and the next time that I think that we would call on you.
No, absolutely. Do you guys have any questions about, you know, anything going on as far as still? I know there's been a couple of questions. We've been getting some phone calls into the office in reference to trees and stuff. Some of them are not on. I know it's not particular to budget, but I don't get, I don't always get to have all of you in one setting. So, does anybody have any questions about anything else that we found? We did find one blowdown out on West Old County. Took the trees and the whole side of the road was washed out. We did get that up, and we got that patch back together. It's good for, you know, temporary fix. Something that I'm comfortable with. It's safe. It's completely passable, but that's one where I need the pulp truck to go out and help me get the tree out of the swamp type of thing and pick it up. And but you know, I think we've done a fairly good job. I know there's a lot of people that haven't got around to tree service. So if you're hearing anything from residents, we are coming around. As people have actually been stuck at home and they've been working, some people have been doing some cleanup. We've actually been taking that with us off their lawns just to kind of help people a little bit. So as we've been walking up through, we've been trying to meet with residents and just give a hand where we can. Some of them have slid big stuff out on the edge of the road, and we've been trying to help with that. But other than that, I've shut the electricity off to the town site. That should be off for the season now, I hope, with any luck at all. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll get the line striping guys in just as soon as the sweeping is wrapped up. I'll schedule him to come in right behind. And although some of the stuff might be postponed, at least everything will be striped and ready to go for the spring. And you got, that will be all done. I might hold off on cleaning any of the catch basins on Academy Hill, just because a lot of those are going to be removed and going to be gone anyways. So if there's a way that, save a little bit of money there and use it for something else, then great. I do plan to do all the other catch basins in town, just like we did last year, but Academy Hill is a majority of our cleaning because that's where the majority of our basins are located. But I really thought about that, and as we progress up over the hill and start that project, I think that it might be a waste of money to do that for the short term gain that we're going to get with those basins. So that will be a discussion that I will be having with the catch basin cleaning guy coming right up.
Great.
Sounds good. Hey, Seth, just so you know, I've got a lot of kudos to you guys from residents about getting the trees cleaned up and everything.
Oh,
So,
good.
Appreciate your hard work.
We've been trying. It's it's a slow process, but we can appreciate. We've been opening up ditch lines, trying to. We hand shoveled out the East Hill County by Casey Stevens there. That was pretty full. We got that all cleaned out. So we've been going through and opening up culverts during the storm. We did have culverts get plugged out on East Hill County Road. We opened it up and actually forced the pole down through and got the culverts up. So that was actually really, really good.
Right.
We've been picking away and trying to get back to people as quick as possible with some of these concerns that they have, because we understand. But that's pretty much where we stand on a maintenance side and on the budget side of things. I'm going to try to do a little bit better. I've talked to John in the past. I'm going to try to get a monthly update out to you guys, so that at least once a month you can see what's going on and what's happening, and then you can pass that along. If you have questions, whatnot, you can please feel free to reach out to John. But I've done a poor job of communicating with you in the past, and then that way you guys have a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So that's one of my goals for this year, is to try to be a little bit better at getting you guys a monthly update.
Thank you very much for that. And I just want to echo Brian and say thank you for all the work you guys have been doing. It's we didn't expect that big one, obviously, and the windstorm and then the snowstorm, and
It was crazy.
I know it's nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts, but thank you very much for all the work. Much appreciated.
That's what we're here for.
Alrighty. I think unless there's any other questions, we're going to move on. We're going to say goodbye to Seth, and thank you very much. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks. Night. All right. So next on the agenda is employee wage part of the budget. I'd like to discuss that in executive session under personnel. So the next thing on the agenda would be the website software. You all saw that information in the packet. I'll turn it over to John because he's been communicating with the company about that.
Yeah, so this is part of a larger suite of products. Obviously, the first conversation really concerned the need to try to find a software solution to compile the agenda, kind of open source in some ways, so that way everyone feels as though they're a part of that. They can submit items, that the agenda is somewhat built with everyone's involvement and fingerprints, I guess. So the software that we had discussed, and I'm not sure if Wanda, you were on board before this or after this, but there was some conversation about this software called Civic Clerk. Civic Clerk basically does that. There's other options out there, but they seem to be the best of the crop right now. And of course, the issue with all of these softwares is that they're built for every type of community, every size of community, and so you can have it literally do everything for you, or you can try to winnow back so that it's a Newcastle size solution as opposed to a Portland or Jacksonville, Florida, or even bigger. So obviously there's not a lot of money to be made in a Newcastle type situation for a lot of these companies. They want to look at the big picture, but there's benefits for us. And so, trying to find the right solution is always a challenge. So really there were two factors that kind of came into this. One was obviously the desire to look at agenda setting and compilation, and I had a chance to go through a demo of not just the Civic Clerk software, but also there's a companion, I guess, company, you could say, where they'll design your website and host your website. They'll create all of the different plugins and the like. And again, you have different options in terms of how you want to put that together. But again, those things somewhat go together. So what I have here is there's two different components. There's the website component, and then of course there's the Civic Clerk component. So that's why there's two different attachments, as part of this. It's only 5, 6, 7 pages to describe how it works and what they do. But basically what they're trying to do is try to make it right size for us. And so a lot of the demo that I went through with the folks involved with both entities, even though they're under the same umbrella, was to try to figure, well, that would work for this in this instance, but we could modify it for you so it can do this. Again, trying to right size it for us as opposed to trying to, have us fit into something that's not really appropriate for a town the size of Newcastle. So anyway, what we came up with, I was actually more excited walking out of this with the options on the website side as opposed to the Civic Clerk side. And that's not because there was a differentiation in terms of what I value and what I think that the town could use, the town government could use. But I felt as though that the website side of it, what they're trying to provide us with in terms of options and plugins and the like, it's more of a seamless fit with what we need and how it can fit in with where we are today. The Civic Clerk side, again, I see value in it, and that's why I included it here. Otherwise, if I didn't, I wouldn't have done so. But there's going to take a little bit more work to try to change how we operate. There's going to be a learning curve for us. Though they'll do a lot on their end to backload our information. They need to, it's going to take some time to change how we operate so that it somewhat mirrors how this software works, because the way the software works is effectively the software runs the meeting for you. I sit there with the laptop or Harriet or whomever, and we're just typing in past and it kind of form fills who votes yes, and I just click this, click that, and there's the motions already written. I mean, it's so slick. But that's certainly something that we've never done. So it would take some work, not just by myself and the staff, but also for the 5 of you. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but I see that there's a lot of value in that. It could streamline our process, make a lot of trying to help increase some transparency of how we're operating. So there's value there in both. You can see the cost is substantial. The website alone was $9,000. That's $7,000 for the website development, and then annual fees of $2,000. They did give us the option of spreading that over 3 years. And of course, everyone is looking at all these different options of trying to augment how you operate and all of that. So that's one piece of this, but I think it's valuable. I think it's something to look at for sure. I think it should be something we should be looking at in this year. I think it's an important priority. The website we have right now, it's not adequate. It's substandard. I mean, we've gone through some training. Everyone in the office has training and is able to put things up and post them, but it's just not user friendly on the user side, on the resident side of it, and it's great for what it is, and it's great for the price we're paying. But I think the services that people are expecting to be able to get on the website, they're not able to easily receive or use, and so And then there's, of course, the frustrations on the staff side in terms of what we're currently using. So I think that there's a great deal of need in kind of restarting that and changing that interface for both us on the inside, but also most importantly for everyone who's trying to access information. So that's the pitch. That's where we are.
I think it's funny that you see more value in the website because, of course, I reviewed it and I went, oh boy, I like the actual civic clerk better than the CMS side of it, and just in terms of functionality for what we do and being able to provide a greater level or greater degree of streamlining, and also that transparency, having the public portal, having everything live streamed, having documents available, having it, agendas built and managed in real time, and then having not the customers, but the residents be able to just sort of tap into all of that. And I know it works with the civic, what is it, civic CMS?
Yeah, Civic CMS. Yeah,
They work together. So Civic CMS is the website side, and what's the other one called? AMS.
Wait, it's Civic CMS and then the Civic Clerk, but they're all under the Civic Plus umbrella. So, and let me just, since we've got the handy dandy share screen issue, let me show you what, just so I can kind of show everybody what we're talking about here. So it's got, in terms of the ability to use the entire, it's not like a limited meeting, so many meetings a month or whatnot, which doesn't matter for us, in terms of a community our size. But, it holds all the files. Basically, the packet would be put together with this type of software. You could have executive session documents. So instead of, this, but it's still confidential. So you still have that piece of it. You track the votes, you track the roll calls. You can manage who's talking. You can move the agenda around pretty smoothly and quickly. So, I mean, it's, again, all these different options, and as you said, live streaming too. There's a lot of, and it's also, the most important thing probably is that you can use it on a number of different platforms. So there's a lot of things that this civic clerk can do for you. It's just a challenge of trying to figure out how do you change the way that we work and the old ways of doing things, I guess, into a format that the software can work with.
So one of the other things that I noticed right away about this platform that I think could potentially be really valuable to the town, because it comes up quite often, is videos with linked agendas and minutes. Meaning when someone on the board or a resident says, when were you talking about Lewis Hill Road? You'd actually be able to do a search for Lewis Hill Road. And if we're using the software correctly, every time the video mentions Lewis Hill Road, it'd show a link to it, and it would, move the video forward to that point in the meeting. So it'd be time-stamped and linked right to that part of the conversation, instead of having to sit down and watch a 2.5 hour long Board of Selectmen's meeting. It'd go right to that portion of the meeting. And boy, I love that idea. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times we've said, oh, when were we talking about, something? And then how do you look that up? It's not like we have a database. We just have paper minutes that we scan and put on the website, and then a video. So someone has to either have like a really good memory or spend a lot of time finding it. And this might help solve that problem, which is actually quite huge. So, anyone have any questions for John?
I think it's worth the dollars. The hassle we've had in the past, I think it's well worth the dollars. especially if we spread it out over 3 years. So.
You're talking about for the website or for the, or
All of
both?
it.
Yeah, yeah,
All
I
of
do
it.
too.
All right, with this print.
Does anybody have any other questions about how it works?
John, has any of the girls in the office ever worked with it?
No, nothing like this at all. I mean, just trying to use, creating PDFs. I mean, I put together all the packets, so it's always been something that I've done. And that's the other nice part about this is that everybody can have their fingers in this at some level. I mean, each of you could have a user where you're submitting items for the agenda, and it's not simply something that I'm sitting there on Friday and compiling a PDF to email to you. It's it's much more. Everybody's got a hand in it, I guess. And if depending upon how we were to structure how it would work, I mean, theoretically, let's say Wanda, there's something you wanted to talk about at the next meeting, and it was on the agenda, and you could submit everything that you wanted to have as part of that conversation, and the staff could submit. I mean, it can get you can really go pretty far with it, but in terms of the history with it, no, there's nothing like this that anyone has used.
Okay.
Damascotta does have the same website. They're also using the civic folks to do their website. A number of communities are, so they're fairly common on that side. But the civic clerk is a bit of a new animal for us.
I was looking up some ordinances on the Damascotta website a while back, and I was pretty impressed with that website. I thought it was easy to navigate. I was able to find the ordinance I was looking for, and so I think the website part of it for sure is definitely leaps and bounds above where we are right now. So.
All right, well, does anyone else have any other thoughts or questions, guidance that we can give John and adding this to the budget or not, or how much of it, all of it, part of it?
I think we do all of it. We had nothing but complaints about our website.
Yeah. A lot of complaints about the website not being updated enough.
I mean, technology is expensive, no matter what you use. It's all expensive. And it's a hard learning curve, but once you've done it, it's like, how did we live without this,
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Carolyn, do you have anything you want to throw in before we move on?
Did you unmute me?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, no, I am like the worst at this, but I did get my laptop up so I can follow the agenda and everything. And and I've looked at it a couple times. I like it.
I think it'd be a big help. So I'm hearing a general consensus, John, to go ahead and include it in the budget for the coming year, if we can. I think that's the path forward. Thank you for gathering all the information and putting it together and doing the demo and all that stuff. Honestly, in my time on the board, every investment we've made in technology so far has been a good one. We've used it well. It's aided the town well, and it's been a big benefit. So I'm hoping this will be the same. Okay, so next on the agenda, I don't know how much of a discussion this necessarily is just sort of maybe the first time we're really going to be talking about it as a board, and it's the ambulance service. Last year, and I know a couple of you have been going to either meetings or having conversations with folks from the ambulance service about their budget this year, and last year we know our budget request from them for Newcastle's share of the ambulance service went up double,
think we went up 11, right? 4,000 to 15,000 last year.
It tripled.
Triple.
It tripled
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so it tripled last year, and I think this year it's a double from last year is going to
Plus, isn't this year's like 40, 35,
No.
40?
Mm,
Nope, not that much. It's 27,975
Nah.
is the request.
so a little less
Not
than
quite double,
a little less than double, right?
but a lot.
So, I know a lot of other towns are sort of going through similar processes talking to the ambulance service. Their funding model has obviously changed, and they've been doing some scrambling to figure out how to keep the service going. I think now is a good time to publicly say that, and I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking for myself. I consider the ambulance service an essential town service. For years, we had it filed in the budget under an appropriation. And it was last year or the year before that we moved it out of an appropriation into its actual own public safety department budget. I think that was a wise move. I don't know anyone who would argue that we should not fund an ambulance service for Newcastle. And we know that if we were to go out on our own, we'd pay a lot more, period. So I'm not saying that we're being held hostage. I'm saying that it's an essential public service that Newcastle provides and funds. And that's my opinion. But I guess I'd like to just open it up. If anyone else has any new information about the ambulance. Joel, I think you had been talking to some folks over there, and I know John had some conversation with some folks about what's going on. And their numbers are set this year. This is where they're at.
Yeah, where we are right now is they set their budget in a calendar year format, so that the Bristols and the other March town meeting towns, Noblesboro and the like, can have a number prepared for their annual town meetings. Obviously, we're a little bit later in that process, but they had a meeting, what they consider to be their budget meeting, where they invited selectmen, and thanks to Joel, was able to be there, and it was quite helpful. I think all of them at that meeting felt it was quite helpful to have Joel there. So, but we're also glad to have Joel here with us, so that's good. Good job, Joel. And but also, they are an organization that is evolving and changing, and part of that is understanding some new realities in terms of the financial end of it. But I think there's also a second piece of this, which is the organizational and governance side of it. And some of you know, and I've talked with some of you and put into my report, over the last couple months or whatnot, talking about the idea of trying to create a new interlocal agreement that would bind these towns together, the 6 owning towns of CLC ambulance, and try to find a way that's perhaps more representative of our needs as communities, though recognizing that there's a difference in the call volume and the valuation and the population of all these communities, and trying to weigh all those factors. So where we are right now is the town of Bristol, on their town meeting warrant, authorized the Board of Selectmen to negotiate an interlocal agreement and enter into an interlocal agreement with the other 5 communities. I have not talked with, of course, they had started their warrant process before, so I'm not sure where that stands, but also, I'm not sure where Deborah Scott is. We haven't talked about the ambulance stuff before all the COVID situation was kicked in. So a lot of people are looking at smaller warrants, but I think it would be an important step forward for us to also include something on our warrant to give you that same level of authorization, so that we can begin and enter into an agreement. Because what will happen is, if we don't do that now, then we'll be another year out, and then that's really 2 years out. So with the way that their budget process works, so we need to jump on this now, in my opinion, and put something on the warrant to give you that authorization to move forward and have a negotiation and a conversation with the other communities to really lock in some of these things that their best practices, their common sense ways of operating that have worked for a number of years, but also put some things in writing so that it's a little bit more, I think in line with the way that towns in 2020 have to operate, and organizations, nonprofit organizations, who are now going to require greater sums of money to operate, to offer 911 services to our residents. They need to operate similarly with a higher level of governance and accountability, which is something that I think they themselves want. So they just need help, and they know that in terms of trying to figure out how to govern yourself, why not look to the folks that are paying the bill to a greater degree? So these communities, Bristol, Newcastle, Damascotta, Noblesboro, we're all willing to help them and assist them because we all see the value of what they provide. And oh, by the way, the cost of trying to do this on our own is not. And that's another stratosphere. To talk about budget goals, it would be a goal to try to avoid having to fund your own ambulance service because it's a really expensive endeavor.
Wanda, go ahead.
So a question I have, just being the newbie to the board and not having gone through this. So as they bill the towns now, how do they do that? Do they bill it equally per population or per runs per each? I mean, how do they come up with that number, I guess is my question. Is it by how many runs they have per year, what our population is,
Right.
Who can pay more than the other town? I mean, I don't know. I just
Right.
wondered how they come up with that. And, and I get that, their payment plan has totally changed. I just know from the hospital standpoint that, we can't use an ambulance anymore to run people from the hospital to skilled, and that used to be their bread and butter. It's like $400 a shot, and they do that all day long. So with that being gone, I understand why they need more money. I just don't understand how it's dedicated through the 6 towns.
Joel, do you want to talk about the funding
Sure.
formula? Because you were on the ground on that one.
So basically the way it works right now and the way it's been working as far as I know, it's the way it's been working for a long time. It's based on the town's valuation and call volume. So it's this 2-part formula. And so that changes the number as to who pays what. That's kind of been a little bit of a sticking point with some towns. South Bristol's one of them because their valuation's higher. So it raises their number up a little bit. But again, at the meeting that I went to, we discussed that and discussed about how to continue with this, and where we've been working under this model for as long as anyone can remember. Kind of everyone at the meeting felt it was appropriate to continue with that now. And I think perhaps the discussion point could be, how does that work in the in the future if we make up a new agreement, whether it's an equal split between the 6 towns or whether we continue with the same model. I think kind of the focus should be more on making sure that the ambulance service is getting what they need, and that's a big part of the increase, as well as the the wages have been stagnant for so long that it's kind of crazy what we were paying these people to put it on the line for us. And I think it's an incredible value. I think it's a great service that we have, and we're lucky to have it. So just supporting it's the thing. So.
No, we couldn't.
Sorry, Brian, could you say that again? It didn't quite come through.
Say that again.
No. Are you muted? Oh, your headset's not working. Sorry.
I can do this earlier today too.
Yeah, that worked.
There you go.
Yeah, I should be back now, aren't I?
Yep.
Yeah, I said we couldn't even hire an EMT for $29,000 a year, so it's well worth the money.
One EMT is what you're saying.
One EMT,
One EMT.
$29,000 a year. Wanda pays her CNAs more than that.
I don't personally, but
Right. But
Lincoln Health does.
I'll be right back. I gotta sing my wife happy birthday. It's her birthday. And she's about
should
to
we all do it?
eat her pie.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna mute you there, Joel. Oh, the joys from working at home.
Right.
So, I mean, I think Joel's up to date on the ambulance stuff. Does anyone else have any other questions or concerns about the ambulance that need addressing now in terms of setting the overall budget goals?
No, not for us. I do want to see their 5-year plan they promised us a year ago.
I think that's going to have to be part and parcel of the new interlocal agreement. But I think John and Bristol have the right idea that we move forward with establishing a new interlocal agreement between the 6 towns. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
That's great. Yeah, I'm going to unmute Joel.
We all want a
If we can
pie.
get her to stop singing.
So we'll go ahead and I think if there's consensus at this point to have John, contact Peter and draft up something for the warrant that would authorize the town to enter into an interlocal agreement with the other 5 founding towns. That's probably a good idea to include on the annual town warrant.
I think so.
All right, so no other questions about the ambulance. We'll move on to talking about the town office building. Joel had started this discussion about just maintenance and repairs and things that need to be done and stuff that hasn't been taken care of in years. And were you able to work on any of that since our last meeting?
I haven't been able to put together some like solid numbers, but I was working last weekend or the weekend before last on putting in the mail slot for town office, and it was just while I was there, I was looking at the trim on the building, the siding on the building, just a few different things that are happening around the building, and then there's the old Taniscott building that's attached to it that also has some has a few things that are neglected and need to be done. And so I was churning around, just sort of those maintenance issues. And then I went in on, I guess it was Monday, that following Monday, to talk to people in the office and just make sure that the mail slot was working. And we kind of started looking at the office. I started looking at the office with everyone in there, thinking about when we reopen. And so whenever we reopen to the public, we're still going to have some needs for protecting the staff and everyone in the building, because the COVID situation isn't going to go away overnight, and we're going to need to figure some stuff out. So that sparked another larger conversation that I started with John about some things that we could do. Some simple things being just setting up some barriers to protect everyone in the office. Just sort of sneeze guard type things. But of course, we have completely open areas, so it's a little more involved. And then, we just started talking about possibly reorganizing the layout a little bit and moving his office and just sort of taking care of some of those more pressing needs just to make the office operate smoothly. And he gave me a list of that, and I've started putting together a few figures and talking to a few different people, just trying to come up with ideas on on sort of the best way to proceed with all that stuff. So if it's something that the rest of the board's interested in pursuing, I think it's something we should do, and it's something that we should do sort of within this, not what the immediate work that we need to do to the office to prepare for reopening would be done in this fiscal year, not the one we're discussing budget wise. So, and I think John said we have some money in reserves for that. So
Yeah, we have $30,000, which was from that project, either the sign or some fairly, some work inside the building that we've set aside from 2 years ago. So there wouldn't be an additional outlay of funds needed for us to do any work in the building or outside the building or what have you. But obviously, as Joel said, there's a larger conversation to be had as to whether or not, what's happening there and making sure that it's a good investment for the town.
right. And so some of the stuff I was looking at, some of the stuff I was looking at and talking to you about, John, last week, I guess it was, there were things that would be more permanent than just a piece of plexiglass with a couple of 2x4s mounted to it. Because I think what we're going to find is that, with the way, what we're currently dealing with right now, we've got potential for something coming back in the fall and next spring, and we're going to be dealing with more of these issues. So I think creating something that's a long-term way to keep everyone separated and safe and healthy is worthwhile. And so I think, the difference is throwing a couple $1,000s at something and just sort of having a campy sort of setup, or spending, $10,000 to $15,000 and having something that's a little bit better. And that's, including sort of reorganizing some offices. And right now it's just a free for all. You come into the office and you can walk right into where the tax assessor and the code enforcement officer are. You can just blow past this barricade and peek in the back and see John and walk into his office and chew his ear about whatever you're upset about that day, or whatever, whatever Celtics game, happened. But at any rate, I think sort of formalizing the town office is something we need to look at, just as an immediate thing, sort of a non-negotiable item. And then the other stuff on the maintenance side of the town office is, are we gonna keep staying where we're staying, or are we thinking about doing something different with our space? Are we outgrowing our space? Do we need something different? Those are the larger questions that we need to answer before we start really putting the kind of money we're probably looking at to maintain that building where it's at.
Well, my opinion, I think that building was a bad investment from day one. So I'm not terribly excited about spending, good money after spending bad money on it. However, the immediate concerns, health concerns of keeping people, both residents and staff, safe is paramount. So whether that means building a wall, modifying the lobby so that people can have distance, and there's maybe just a single window with a counter, one counter, and people have to go one at a time instead of just an open air free for all the way it is now. It might be a good idea. We don't, like you said, we just don't know how long this is going to last and what's going to be involved.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think we should do something that doesn't look like a prison, but something that encloses that whole front end. And, like Joel said, put a door up for Ken in Jim's office and put another entry door into the town hall from there. I think it's a good idea. The rest of it, I don't know. I agree with Ben. It's a lot of money to put into an old building, but it's what we got. So,
Anybody
So-
else? Wanda? Carolyn?
Well, I just think that life as we know it is definitely going to change. And as everybody keeps pushing to open everything up, that's all well and good. But I see us having to take precautions for a long, long time. And, I think Joel and I had a little conversation the other day about some ideas about, closing off the clerks and closing off, that other office, and at least keep it so people just can't walk right in. It is definitely a good idea because, we got to keep people safe, and this isn't going to go away tomorrow. We're going to be looking at this the way we do business for a long, long time, I think. Or I would hope that this has opened up everybody's eyes to say that we should be taking more precautions than we've been taking in the past.
hey, John, you know if there's going to be any FEMA dollars for any of this stuff?
There is, if we can, we are in a state of emergency, so we do qualify as an emergency. Now, is this mitigation? Is this, I don't know. I have to figure out if we can, as the state of emergency continues, will it continue long enough so that we can make the repairs we need to deal with the state of emergency? Like that, to me, that's kind of the bridge we have to get over, right? It's because I think, obviously we could say, oh, we're going to rebuild the town office, and it's feeling like, of course, that's not going to work. But for us to get back to work as part of the state of emergency, if there's items that we have to accomplish, sneeze guards or whatever you want to call them. I call them sneeze guards, just growing up going to Bonanza or whatever, there was that, it's just, I don't know if that's what the proper term is, but that's what I call them. That's really, I think that's the first line of defense that we're going to have to accomplish. And but barriers of, I think that there's some other things that maybe aren't as applicable, but they could be. I think we could talk to FEMA and see if we can get some answers just to, once we get a scope, and we can present them with a scope and just see how much of it would fly. Because these are things we need to do, but and that's the way FEMA works, is these are things you should need to do. There's a question of whether or not you'll get reimbursement for them, but you're going to have to do them anyway. The mitigation usually is more from the perspective of, well, you didn't need to do them, but it's avoiding a future event. We're kind of in this weird world with with where we are right now of reopening, but we're still in a state of emergency. That's a different world than what we've dealt with in terms of how FEMA has operated. So I'm interested to see how they attach themselves to these states of emergency extending, but potentially stay-at-home orders, relaxing. Where does that fit? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but we can see if we can find out.
Go.
So then sort of phase two of it's a complicated process. So there's the office end of things, and then there's what we're doing right now. And so right now we're all speaking to each other from the safety of our own homes. At some point this is going to end and we're all going to be back together. And the current selectmen's office that we have is not sufficient for any amount of social distancing whatsoever. And so I think we're going to have to look at throwing some of this money and set up and doing something so that the community room can serve as that place for us. Because I think even, whenever we end up meeting again as a board in person with public present, there's going to need to be a little bit of a difference in the way we interact. We're probably going to need more space between us instead of just crammed around three tables. So that's the other side of this that we need to look at. So that's the other part of it.
Well, in the short term, I think, you know, we're covered in the short term because we have the money in reserve to deal with what needs to be dealt with. That should cover a sizable remodel of the primary office space for staff. And we don't even have to bring it up in terms of a budget discussion for next budget cycle. The question about next budget cycle is, are there pressing needs for town buildings that should be included in the upcoming budget cycle? Because if there are, and we don't address them now, it'll be another year before we can talk about raising money to deal with it. So if there's sills that are rotting out, if there's doors and windows that need replacing, if there's trim that's falling off that needs to be dealt with, that we don't have budgeted right now, we need to get money estimates together for what that'll take so we can include it in the upcoming budget cycle. Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say all of those things are happening right now. So in the building.
Yay, goody.
I mean, there's massive breaks in the siding. The siding on the actual town office is probably doing okay. When I opened up the wall to cut that mail slot, there was a lot of moisture inside the wall. More moisture than there should be, especially at this time of year. And yeah, so that was a little concerning. It wasn't bad, but I mean, you could see the mold on the boards on the inside. It seemed to me almost like it was less of a internal vapor trying to get out, more of a potential some water leaks living within the between the vapor barrier and the sheathing and the siding, not really being able to get back out.
Are you thinking the whole building needs to be resided?
No, I mean, I think with some caulking and painting and fixing some trim that's visibly rotten, that's when you start finding things, you know, like you don't know until you cut the hole. You don't know until you pull one piece of trim off and you find something that, you don't want to see. I mean, there's a couple corner boards that you can see through that are, have huge areas of mold. And to think that there's not something behind that is pretty naive. And then, so, I mean, again, it could be at the very least just sort of addressing some of those issues and changing some of the trim. And, the building hasn't ever been painted. There's a lot of maintenance stuff that's just not been taken care of. And what I was kind of thinking is, at the very minimum, I had reached out to a painter to try and get an estimate on painting the building and dealing with some of the caulking and all that stuff. I haven't heard back from him yet, but I was gonna sort of put together some of these ideas and suggest that we put together a reserve account to use as these things come up that we want to address. Again, the larger question has to be how far are we going to go with this? Are we going to keep operating out of that space? Are we going to do a larger renovation to that space at some point to make it serve our needs in the next 5 years? Are we going to move to a different building in 5 years? Those are kind of the questions that dictate how much money you put into something.
So I think at this point, we got quite a bit more to cover tonight.
Yeah.
So let's leave it at this unless anyone objects. You and John have a conversation about establishing a reserve account in an amount you feel is commensurate with what needs to be attended to in this coming year, with no thought of 5-year plans, 10-year plans, just what needs to be addressed. John can see to it that that amount gets into a reserve account and meets the overall budget goal of not raising the mill rate, and come back to us when John does his budget presentation. Does that sound good for now? All right.
Works for me.
You guys will sort it out. John will get back to us.
Okay.
Sorry, my screen keeps going off here. All right, so let's move on and have a quick discussion about 5.2. Beginning to have a conversation about the idea of adopting a charter for the town of Newcastle. This is an idea that's been honestly coming for years. It's always an emergency that seems to be the thing that kind of makes you realize, wow, this this would be one of those situations where if we'd had a charter and we'd had a little bit of forethought, we may not be in quite the pickle that we are in terms of having to have an annual public town meeting. There would have been other potential ways that it could have been handled, but only through charter. And that's just one example of the ways that a charter might benefit the town of Newcastle. The town clerk and I have had several discussions about options for why a charter might make sense. Several of the selectmen over the years and I have had conversations about various and different issues. I think at this point, the question before the board is whether or not to take this next step of committing to forming a charter commission. Under Maine law, it's very clear, and I wasn't sure if anyone's had time to review the rules in law surrounding how to go about a charter, but basically a town forms a charter commission and they're charged with exploring adopting a charter and making a recommendation. They have a certain time frame. The board, the charter commission itself has to have a certain composition. Certain numbers of members are elected, some are appointed, some come from this group and that body, some are at large. And then and they have to go about their work and they have to present something within a certain time frame. It doesn't mean that the town has to adopt it. It doesn't mean that we're definitely moving towards a charter one way or the other. A charter commission is established to investigate whether the town would benefit by moving to a charter. And I believe at this point that question, its day is now. So that's kind of where we are with it, and I would think that if we don't at least put forth the idea that we're going to ask the town to form a charter commission at our upcoming annual town meeting, whenever that is, it won't be long before we see someone do a petition to do that. Does anyone have any thoughts about charter and anything I've just said? Wanda.
Not so much. I understand what you're saying. I think my bigger concern about all of this is that not able to have public hearings and meetings right now and those kind of things. You know, how do you truly, like we've just put on the thing, we still got to deal with the code thing, and how do we get that out and try to get it passed? And with the town meeting and not knowing how we're all going to meet. And you know, if this is something that the town really wants to do, you want it to pass, but how do you get the information to the residents so that they feel good, whether they're for it or against it? But how do we get the information to anybody about any of this stuff at this town meeting to get this kind of stuff passed? That's my biggest concern, is that we're in unknown territories right now as to how the next few weeks are going to work, the next couple months are going to work, and how do we get all this information that we need to get to? And as we know in the past, that if you don't, even if you give them the information, sometimes things still get voted down. But you know, if people feel like they're getting blindsided or we're trying to come in the back door, nothing's ever going to get passed, and then you kind of set yourself up for, you know, kind of an uphill battle. So that's my only concern, is it the right time? Only because we're in such a unknown area of time right now. That's just my thought.
Good. It's a great question. One we don't obviously have an answer for, other than to say we're going to have to keep reinventing how we do business. Everyone is. The question of timing is always a good one. It's always a good one. The most pressing question is going to be, how do we have a town meeting? When do we have that town meeting? Obviously. But I know that everyone is assuming that at some point, some say sooner rather than later, life will return to normal. Whether you believe that or not, I don't know. And we know that things will be different sometime soon. All the work for that would go into the Charter Commission, the work that the Charter Commission would do, would have to take place beginning after whenever our town meeting is. So assuming we come up with an answer about how we're going to do town meeting, that'll give us a clue about how we're going to do charter. And I'm not sure that postponing it another year buys us anything. We'll have to have good answers, or at least not horrible answers, about how we're going to keep doing the business of the town soon. Joel?
I kind of think that, one of the things about adversity is it gives you a different perspective on things, and a lot of times you come up with better ideas because of it. And I think it might be a good time to look at good time for the charter committee to be formed and start thinking about what we really need in Newcastle, what the town government should look like, and what policies we need to implement. And I think it's a good time to visit all those things, because it's fresh in everyone's mind. And again, we are trying to reinvent the wheel every day. Every day something changes. So I think it's a good time to look at that stuff.
All right. So if we are going to move forward, the only other decision we'd have to make would be on elections. We have to elect 6 people to it and appoint 3 from what I was reading in it. And we can either do the elections at town meeting the same time if we adopt the plan to move ahead with the charter, or we have 60 days after town meeting to hold an election to elect those people. So, Of course, we have to find 9 people that are willing to volunteer their life for a year,
Right.
So.
Yeah, right.
And I guess that's the other thing, we barely have people enough to sit on the committees that we have now.
Yeah, I know.
We've struggled with that all along. We've totally struggled with that. And I just think, I think if we started talking about this 6 months ago, but now when town meeting should be, in 2 months, and now it's not going to be, but, and maybe I read the statutes, Brian, that you sent. I guess I don't know enough about charter to maybe to speak clearly about it. It just seemed like it's a huge change. And I think if you're going to have something that's going to have a huge change, you gotta try to inform people what that means.
Right. Well, the nice thing about this, if we got on this year's warrant for town meeting, that would start the conversation, Wanda. We'd have that the full year actually for the committee to come back with their suggestions for what they think we should do. So it's not like we're doing anything this year. We're just going to start that committee. And I agree, it's going to be tough to find 9 people, but it starts the conversation versus waiting another year to start that conversation. And, and the committee might come back and say, yeah, no, we don't think this is a good idea at all. Or at the 22 town meeting, or I guess the 21, 22 town meeting, the town might say, yeah, no, we don't like this one.
Nope.
But at least it gets that conversation going over next year. And we
Well,
can
it does
inform
if
people over next year.
if it gets passed, right?
If the committee gets passed, putting a committee together gets passed. That usually would, because we're just asking to put a committee together. We're not asking to commit any dollars or anything else. We're just asking 9 people to put their time together for the next year.
So So what's the consensus on this? I don't necessarily, I mean, if we need to, if someone wants to make a motion, we can make it official. We can do it by consensus. At this point, the question is just whether or not we proceed with the idea of asking the town to do it. Now, we could table it since we're obviously not going to be putting the warrant together tomorrow for town meeting. We can continue this discussion at our next selectmen's meeting. This doesn't have to be a once and done thing. And I'd be happy to just give everybody until the next regularly scheduled meeting. We'll put it on the agenda and we can continue reading about it and thinking about it, and we can table the conversation until then, if everyone's happy to do that. If not, will of the board.
I'm good with tabling if you want to. Maybe Ben, we can work together, or Joel, we can work together and put some notes together. So have it laid out a little more so people have a better understanding of it.
I would like to do a little more research on it myself, just so I have a better understanding of what it all is.
I would too.
I think that's a great idea. Why don't we plan to, since we know our next meeting is going to be on Zoom, why don't we plan to do a little more research, maybe put together a very short 4 or 5 slide PowerPoint that we can throw up and share. It'll go out on the live stream. People can see it on the video, and it'll be the first, besides this conversation, first sort of intro to the idea. So that's good. I think let's do that. Let's table the discussion, pick it up again at our next meeting on the 11th of May. So moving on to, let's see, the things I added to the agenda. 5.3. Okay. Whole lot of uncertainty going on. However, the governor did go ahead and set Tuesday, July 14th for the primaries. That is usually the day that coincides that we line up our secret ballot vote. That's also when we do our school referendum vote, election of municipal officers, all of that stuff gets taken care of on that day so that people only have to go to the polls once. I'd like to suggest that we tentatively follow that for now and set our annual town meeting to start on the 14th and do the secret ballot vote on the 14th and have our open town meeting on the 20th. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't have any answers to any questions. I'm just going to suggest that we move forward and set the date, and that by doing so, we get all of our work done. We get the book done, we get the budget done, we get everything we need to get done in preparation for those dates. If we get closer and the dates change, if the method changes, if anything changes, we can reassess at that point, but we'll have our work done. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I had the same thoughts. As long as we keep our agenda and everything moving forward as if the meeting was in June, I'd like to have everything done on our normal time schedule. And
I'm pushing it a month. That's what I'm suggesting.
You want to push the whole thing a month?
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. I'm suggesting that we line up with what the governor is doing. She pushed everything a month. I'm suggesting we push everything a month.
Well, no, I think we should move the meeting to the 20th of July. Do the votes the 14th, push our town meeting to the 20th. Just saying, I'd like to keep our budget work and everything else in the same time frame as if we're doing it in June, so that we don't get behind.
Oh no, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah, I was just talking about dates, right? Yeah. No, we're gonna keep the budget meetings rolling. I'm just talking about the dates for town meeting. That's all.
Yeah. No, I agree. When I heard she put it to the 14th, that my first thing with John was we should do it the 20th. So.
Yeah, the 20th, right. So I think that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and move annual town meeting to the 20th with, the secret ballot vote on the 14th to line up with the primaries.
So moved.
Second it.
Any other discussion about that? It may change, but for now we've got a date to shoot for. All right.
I think we have to start somewhere, and it makes sense that everybody's going to the polls that day, so.
Right.
Or if they don't, it'll get changed and we'll be back talking about it again.
You got it. Exactly. But it gives us something. So it's at least something. All right. All in favor of establishing the date of annual town meeting is July 14th and 20th. That passes 5-0. All right. So are you really going to have a fit if I don't do a roll call, John?
No,
Thank you.
you know there is in the new bylaws you can approve with unanimous consent, so that's also an option. So you wouldn't have to necessarily go through a roll call, I would think. But anyway, just something to think about.
All right. I think if I see 5 hands in the air, we're good.
That's
Or
good.
At least
Yep.
3, we're good. All right. So the next thing, I guess I had 5.4 was to suggest, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that what we do is we ask John and Seth to come back in a week, and we have Seth present his capital budget, and we have John present the overall budget and demonstrate how he has met the goal that we've given him. And then at that meeting, we would get the budget, and I would like to suggest that over the course of the next 2 weeks, because we're in a period now where there's actually 3 weeks between this official regularly scheduled board of selectmen's meeting and the next one, there's a 3-week gap. So if we do our next budget meeting next week, we get all that presentation out of the way, we get the budget packet presented to us, and then we have it. In the intervening 2 weeks before May 11th, if each of us could schedule one-on-one time to get our answers to questions, concerns, and we schedule one-on-one time with John, then we don't have to hog up this meeting with all those questions and answers and going back and forth. We can do it individually and get the answers that we need. And if they're bigger than that, we can bring them back to the meeting and we can have a more focused discussion. And we're not going on for hours and hours and hours and hours about individual budget lines. Everyone will have a chance to review it, ask the questions of John, and then we'll come back and the idea would be on the 11th of May to move the budget. 3 weeks. We get
Sounds
the capital.
good.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'd like to make a motion that we schedule a Board of Selectmen's budget meeting, only budget meeting, in a week. That's the 27th, 7 o'clock, to have the capital budget presented and the total budget presented. Do I have a second?
A second.
All right. Any other discussion, concerns about this process?
No.
All in favor? 5-0. Thank you. All right. So 5.5, Wanda, we said we were going to have a very small discussion about what we're going to do about the code and all the work that we put into that. It's been completely dropped because we don't know what to do with it. And I think the big question is just whether or not we think it should, can, or will go on the warrant for this coming year, and how can that happen? Knowing that in order to have that happen, it has to go through at least one public hearing, as any ordinance must. And I don't have any answers to that question. I really don't know. I don't know how we're going to hold a public hearing on anything, period.
Right.
I just don't know.
Yeah, I know. I asked John if we could find out from the legislature, we could do it over Zoom.
You know,
200 people on this.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. Not that I want to manage that, but
Yeah.
you know, is it possible?
Now, I don't know for sure, but I heard through the grapevine that there was a town in Maine that was actually going to conduct their annual town meeting in a field.
Okay.
I'm not recommending this. I don't think that's a great solution. But apparently they felt the pressure to pass their budget was so great that that was their only way forward. So someone with a bullhorn up front is yelling at a bunch of people all standing 6 feet away from each other in a big field somewhere. I really wish the legislature would come up with some better guidance or a solution that doesn't involve that.
Right.
That's just a bad idea for a lot of reasons. So,
Do you know what we did in 1918?
I've asked, but no one seems to know.
Well, we can issue everybody mask in Perel when they come through the door, and
There you go. Use the old, well, you can use we can use the gym at the high school would give a spacing for the,
give everybody,
55
give
people we
everybody
get.
surgical mask. I mean, we're doing it at work, you know?
Yep.
I mean, we can't always be 6 feet apart, but we have our mask on from the time we get there till the time we leave.
Right.
We don't have to make any decisions right now. The biggest question for me about the code or any ordinance that would need to go on the warrant for annual town meeting is just going to be how we do that public hearing. That's going to be required by law, and it has to precede the meeting. I think there are some intriguing possibilities for how to manage town meeting. They're not all going to be ideal. None of them are going to be ideal. One of them is going to be less horrible than the others, but we'll figure it out. Hopefully as we get closer to when we need to. But that public hearing is going to be an issue. And it may just mean that ultimately anything that requires a public hearing needs to be kicked down the road a little bit.
Maybe we could always hold it till November.
And that may be the option. I don't think we have to decide now. We can continue drafting the warrant as if it was included. And if we just can't meet the deadlines, we can't meet the deadlines.
Yeah, because we'd have to do it by what? 45 days in advance too, right?
No. For ordinance, I think it's only 2 weeks.
Is it only 2 weeks?
Only 2 weeks.
Right.
So we'd have to get it done by July 1.
Well, depends upon the method of voting.
Right.
So the public hearing, there's two different levels for the public hearing. The public hearing for the planning board is 2 weeks notice. And that has to be done so long before it goes before you. The second piece is, how do you decide the question? And previously the discussion that the five of you had was that you would hope to have that discussion on the floor of town meeting. That may be feasible, that may not be feasible. So that, I mean, it does go back to the method of voting ultimately. And if you aren't going to be able to have that conversation with residents, does that impact how you would, try to talk to the community about what's good, what's bad, how to get feedback? I mean, it does. I think a lot of it changes in terms of how you would want to have that conversation and how they would want to make a decision, as residents. So it's, I think we're going to get some guidance this week from the Secretary of State's office. Secretary of State was on Maine Hope Radio today. He gave a little bit of an interview with some guidance. Of course, we just got the order in at the end of last week from the governor about moving to July. So I think everyone's trying to figure this out. It seems as though they're trying to move in the same method as the absentee process. But I still have some grave concerns with the 12 hours of a polling place being open. It just seems like a foolish exercise, and the legislature could do something that offered a little bit more relief to that. But, July will be a different time than it is right now, certainly. But, I think we're all going to be looking for ways to minimize, even once the curve is flattened and turned and whatever the curve is doing. We're going to be doing a lot of different measures. And to me, absentees using the same process as what we've done for all these years really isn't a meaningful enough change, and especially for towns like ours. I mean, there's so much that's based upon that annual town meeting on the floor. I don't think they really appreciate how important that is and how it really works at the state level. So I've worked up a letter I may send just for my own personal belief that they need to look at some different vote by mail options, I think, than what they're doing right now, personally. But
Now, interestingly, and I know we got to move on, but just to put a bug in everyone's ear so you can be thinking about it, for town issues. So that would be elections of town officials and the town warrant, anything that's town related, not state related. We actually have the authority to establish the method of voting. We can establish the method, the date and time of voting. We can establish the method of voting. We could, just the five of us, move to simply a mail, vote by mail method just for town issues. That may be something we need to talk about in the coming weeks as a possibility. How would that look? How would it work? How do we process it? But it is out there for us.
So that would be like an absentee kind of thing just for the town? I mean, it would be mailed the same sort of way?
Kind of, yes.
To put it in perspective?
Yeah.
that's the best way to describe it. I mean, that comparison is probably the best one people would recognize because they've done that. A lot of people have done that. But the issue is, of course, is that absentees require someone to make a request.
Right.
So the question is, can we do that without that request? A lot of these vote by mail states, they send it to whoever the registrant is on the voter list. The current situation is not only can we, you have to request a ballot, but you still have to have for a state election, which means even if whatever we do, the state is still going to mandate whatever they're going to mandate for their primary on July 14th. So they're really the limiting factor for this. If we didn't have a state election, like Ben said, we could do whatever we want effectively. But if the state does theirs, we are going to have people coming in. Presumably they're going to try to do the same process they usually do, which means we're going to have the polls are going to have to be open 8 to 8. The only way you can do the absentees for the state ballot is if there's a request. So it's a problem. But if we didn't have those hurdles, we would have so many more options. And maybe the state will relax that. Maybe they have that latitude.
But even if we decide to go on our own and go and let the state do what the state does, regardless of whether we agree with it or not, and we just say we're gonna do Newcastle, we're gonna do us, and this is the way we're gonna do it, and we're gonna vote by mail. There's a lot of hard conversations and decisions that need to be made about how to even do that.
Right.
So I don't want to have the conversation now. I just want to put a bug in everyone's ear so you can be thinking about it. If you got any brilliant ideas at 3 in the morning, write them down. We'll talk about it on our agenda on the 11th. So at this point, we're going to move on. Everyone got John's report, town administrator report and communications, or is there any questions, concerns about any of that? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the 2 warrants that we had. The first one you got in your packet, it was for $119,064.25. The other came via Shelley this morning. Did everyone see it?
Yeah.
Fire warrant?
Yeah.
Yep.
Fire warrant.
Yeah, for $1,111.98. Do I have a motion on the 2 warrants?
So moved.
Second.
Joel seconds. So do we have any questions about any of the items on either of the 2 warrants? I know we got some follow-up information about the Hagar.
Yeah, I guess I just was, it was a large amount to just say, okay, that's just fine with me. So I guess I just wanted more information, and it sounds like a lot of it is just the retainer and just kind of to give them some money to kind of get things started. That's sort of how I read it. I'm not good at all these lovely contractors payment things, but it sounds like that's kind of what it's about.
Yep. No, you're right. That's exactly right, Wanda. It's the kind of the initial ramp up of the project. It's probably if you've driven up Academy Hill, you see there's the catch basins that are sitting on both
Right.
front lawns. So it's that kind of, okay, now we're starting to ramp up and get rolling. So,
All right.
and I would, this is part of that kind of process. I'm glad you asked the question because, we usually don't include invoices with the warrant, but as I was mentioning to Shelley, if we can, for this warrant, and I want to do the Academy Hill warrant separately from everything else, include this, the application for payment, so that way you guys could get a chance to see it and review it. So anyway, just so you know, my plan is to have that with all of those warrants, that this would be attached to it every time. And if you do have questions, though, feel free to ask, and we can get clarification, or get a hold of Gartley and Dorsey and have them review, and so forth. So that's the idea, is to build more of a process with this as we start going. It was the first one, but it was a good question.
Until the project's over, John, why don't you on the agenda and include it in the packet, just break the project, the Academy Hill project, out as a separate warrant.
Mm-hmm.
Completely. So we'd have the regular, the town warrant, the fire warrant, the Academy Hill project warrant. And you just see them all three with their corresponding documentation, or whatever is necessary, just for as long as the project runs.
Yep, that's the plan. That sounds good.
Any other questions about the warrant? All in favor of both warrants? That passes 5-0.
Oh, Ben, one thing on my report, if we could just quickly touch on that.
Yep.
We are going to be meeting on Wednesday. It sounds like for to talk about the LED streetlight conversation, to talk with the two vendors, Affinity and who's it? Whatever it is. Anyway, Brian's been willing to sign up. If there's anyone else who's interested, please let me know from the board. We're trying to pull that together. 1:30 and I think 4 on Wednesday. So if you're interested and available, let me know.
Great. Thank you very much, John. So we're going to adjourn the meeting and the open part of the meeting in a minute. We're going to move to executive session. I'm going to have John close the Zoom meeting, and I'm going to send all of you an invite link to a Google Meet. It'll come in your town email, so check that in a few minutes. Click the link. It should pop right up. If not, you've all got my number. You got my email. I'll be sitting right here. Call me, email me. We'll get in there somehow. And if it just doesn't work, I'll fire up Zoom and send a link out that way. So that's the backup plan. Everybody good?
Good.
Yep.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second, Joel, all in favor of adjourning the meeting? And that passes 5-0. The time is 9:02. Thank you, Harriet. Thank you all. John, have a good night. And I'll see you guys all in a little bit.